Being a teacher is no easy task, but anyone can get the job done with the right attitude. Or at least, that's what optimistic second grade teacher Janine Teagues believes. Played by Quinta Brunson, she comes to class filled with ideas to help inspire her students to do better. It's not always easy, especially when she's up against mismanagement, underfunding, and sometimes the comical apathy of her colleagues. But no matter the odds, Miss Teagues never quits. She shows up every day to teach the kids at Abbott Elementary. I'm Ronald Young Jr., and I'm on the couch. All right, this is Ronald, and I am on the couch after watching Abbott Elementary. Abbott Elementary, created by Quinta Brunson, starring Quinta Brunson, Tyler James Williams, Janelle James, Lisa Ann Walter, Chris Perfetti, Sheryl Lee Ralph, and William Stanford Davis. And for a complete cast listing, as always, you can go to the link in my show notes. All right, so Abbott Elementary is a sitcom that airs on ABC and is distributed on Hulu the next day. And it is a mockumentary about an elementary school in Philadelphia where Quinta Brunson plays Janine Teagues. She is, I think she's a third or fourth year teacher. She's early in her teaching career, and it kind of details the interaction she has working as a teacher in this elementary school with her coworkers and with the kids and, you know, kind of with the city of Philadelphia as a whole. This mockumentary format, first of all, is, you know, increasingly popular amongst television shows today. If it's not mockumentary or single camera, I mean, there's just like a style that is with half-hour comedies today that seems to be more duplicated more often than not these days. And this one is of the vein of The Office, Parks and Rec, Arrested Development, like those. It comes from the same humor family, I would say, as those shows. But this is very good. It's very Black, which I appreciate. You know, majority Black cast dealing with a majority Black school. All of their interactions with each other are based in kind of the intergenerationality of it all. You know, you have first year teachers, you have new teachers, you have a substitute teacher who becomes a full-time teacher. You have, you know, young people and older people all kind of interacting together, but all doing similar or the same jobs. And it's kind of a lot of the jokes and the humor come out of that because they all have distinct personalities and ideas about how the job should be done. And a lot of very funny jokes come out of that. Some of it is just like, you know, some of it is based in kind of reality. If you think about any job you've ever had where you've worked with people that are much older than you, that have been at the job a much longer, some of the jokes are all around Janine's eagerness to kind of reinvent the wheel versus some of the more seasoned teachers. There's Barbara, played by Sheryl Lee Ralph, who is, you know, a mentor and kind of like a strong, proud Christian Black woman. That is the role that she plays. And kind of like the back and forth between her and Janine, or even Miss Sheminti, I think her name is Melissa, that's her first name, but Miss Sheminti, who's also an older seasoned teacher, how they really do have a lay of the land, and they're kind of watching the young folks mess up early in their careers because they think they know better. So some of the jokes come from that. Some of the lessons come from that. And some of it's just like wild out zany humor. Of course, we have the principal, Ava Coleman, played by Janelle James, in the show, who brings a lot of the zany sense of humor, as well as the janitor, Mr. Johnson. They bring this element of humor that is kind of just off the wall, and they are kind of the main sources of that. That and the kids, of course. The kids are always kind of random, and they have like a rotating cast of you know, elementary school students that are kind of on and off the camera and there to provide a lot of comic relief. There's jokes coming in every direction from here. And because of that, I think it lends itself to more of a Parks and Rec than The Office. The Office felt a lot more static because oftentimes we were dealing with all of these coworkers dealing with each other and their boss. The most. And in a lot of ways, Michael Scott and Ava Coleman are very similar. They're very similar. As a matter of fact, there is stuff that Ava Coleman has done that is almost on par with what Michael Scott has done. But it also gives me pause because I'm like, wow, this is completely different antics coming out of a black woman versus coming out of a white man. And I mean, as someone who's watched a lot of The Office, there's some problematic things that Michael Scott does. And I'm sitting here watching Ava Coleman. I'm like, oh, it's kind of problematic what you're doing here, but it feels completely different. One, because it's a woman doing it, and two, because it's a black woman doing it. And it hits different. You know what I mean? Like, it's definitely not coming from like an oppressive place or a place of, there's still that same lack of awareness, and kind of overinflated ego in the same place, like, or more of a lack of your sense of your own place within a conversation, and certainly a lack of the sense of power that you lend to a conversation. And there's some awkwardness that comes from the relationship between a boss and her subordinates that still exists, that also existed in The Office. But I think it's just different sometimes. And again, because it's not the only thing, it's not the only conflict that drives the show. With The Office, you really didn't have other factors that came in to drive the conflict. And with not often. And on Abbott Elementary, there's plenty of other factors that drive the conflict of this show. They do a very good job of confronting the problems in education today. Underfunding, rise of charter schools, educational standards. All of those are major plot points at some point, especially along the course of season two. Season two being the most recent season that just ended. But a lot of the plot is driven, the main plot is driven by what's going on there. How are we going to fund our classrooms? We have to buy our own school supplies. What's going to happen with our educational standards? We have to teach to a certain standard. How are we going to keep up with it? What's our plan for keeping up with it? All of that, those are like major plot points to drive like the main plot. That being said, I do wonder how far this can go in terms of season over season. A show like The Office had 9 seasons, or is either 8 or 9 seasons, 7 of them with Michael Scott. Yeah, it had 9 seasons, 7 of them with Michael Scott, 2 without. Michael Scott was driving much of the plot there. This show is definitely more of an ensemble. Everyone is carrying their weight in the cast. And I'm thinking if this show went for 9 seasons, I would be surprised as to what they would be talking about in season 9, what they'd be tackling. And I'm saying that knowing that The Office overstayed its welcome probably by about 3 or 4 seasons, if we're being honest. I think it probably could have ended in season 6 or 7. It certainly could have ended when Michael Scott left, but I think there's probably a world in it probably could have ended in season 6. I'm saying this having recently watched through season 6 of the extended episodes on Peacock. And the only reason why I'm bringing that up is to say, if that show, which is kind of like the originator of this format, can run out of things to talk about, then certainly, one of the derivative shows can run out of things to talk about. And I'm not saying that to say like, oh, this is a bad show. I don't think it's a bad show. I think it's a great show. And I think, we talk about it like, and most people listening to this have probably watched it and probably have enjoyed it. If you haven't, you will enjoy this show. It's easily bingeable. There's lots to do. There's lots that you're going to laugh at. All of that, all of those boxes are checked. But in terms of longevity, and especially with the idea of like, kind of like attention today, it just makes me wonder like, how far can it go in terms of before we're just like, oh, okay, well, Janine's has a plucky attitude and, oh, will she be with Gregory or not? Like, what's going on here? And I'm wondering how long they can do that. So far, 2 seasons, I'm like, okay. And I think the other part of it is because one of the main plot points is whether Janine and Gregory, which is like tale as old as time when it comes to sitcoms, but Janine and Gregory, whether they're ever going to actually get together. Now, Janine and Gregory are kind of like the Jim and Pam of this show. And I'm watching this, and right now, at the end of season 2, they are in the same place that Jim and Pam were at the end of season 2. which was that they had kissed at some point in the season. In The Office, it was at the end of season 2. In Abbott Elementary, it's in the middle of season 2. And by the end of it, there was some sort of conversation between them that, for whatever reason, means that they're not going to be together. So it kind of feels like I'm not sure, and naturally maybe that's where a relationship like this ends up on a show in this format. But I will say, just watching it feels a lot one-to-one. And that's not to say, I'm not saying that anyone's copying anybody. I don't think that's the case here. But I think I'm tired of will they, won't they in a lot of cases. Sometimes I think it's okay for, instead of there to be romantic tension between two leads in a show, there can just be friendship. They could just push it in a different direction. And I think, I don't have all the answers. I don't know if it's always that simple. But I know you have network responsibilities, and you have to answer the shareholders. You have to keep the show on the air. You have to keep people interested. I understand all those things. So I know it's not always as easy as I'm maybe making it seem, but I know that watching a show like this, the will they, won't they of it all is sometimes a little bit distracting. And I feel like it then sets up characters, like in this case, both Janine and Gregory had partners, and they broke up with those partners who I thought were fine people, but they broke up with them and made them flawed in ways that only made Janine and Gregory good for each other, which I think enforces this idea of like soulmate / perfect match culture that we have in here that kind of leaves a lot of people feeling lonely. Like, oh, there's no match for me out there. Oh, there's no soulmate out there for me. And when the truth is, like, people are just trying their hardest to make it work. And I don't often feel like I see like a ton of examples of that being successful on television and movies, but rather the idea of two people being perfectly suited for each other. That's why they're together, which I feel like again, it just enforces something different. Yeah, I don't mean to wax too long. That being said, it's a good show. It's a very good show. I think it has a big heart. I think they do a lot of very in-depth, emotional things, for lack of a better term. They explore a lot of emotion in this show. And I think sometimes they set it up in a way that's kind of obvious that there's going to be an emotional beat coming later in the show. And I don't always know how I feel about that. I feel like sometimes if you're just going to be emotional, go ahead and be emotional. I think that there's been plenty of comedies that have shown that we can, have emotional depth in a way that you would expect to find in a drama. And I think that there's plenty of comedies that do that well. Abbott Elementary is another show that has been doing that well, especially in season 2. They've had some long stretches of moments where they're having serious conversations, and I feel like it's really working for them. I think the only thing I would change is, with a network show, you have to deal with certain timing of the script to fit 22 minutes almost perfectly because you have commercials. If this show were streaming, I imagine that some of these beats would be hit completely differently. And I would love to see that. As a matter of fact, what I'm saying is I would love for Hulu to own this show completely and this not even to be on network television. But I think that network television gives it a wider audience that it can present to. That being said, I don't think this show is perfect, but I do think it is wonderful and great. And I know some people are not going to be happy with the score that I give it. I give it a 3.99 of 5 stars. I don't think it's quite a 4-star show, but it's close. It's like, and it's not over yet. I could come back after season 3 or 4 and say, wow, they really just took it above and beyond. But this is one of the best shows on television right now. I would definitely say it's anyone. Certainly one of the best comedies. And I certainly appreciate that exists, and that like it has a bringing a whole new audience into like the mockumentary format and to like this type of into this type of comedy. Modern Family. There was another mockumentary show that was on ABC, the same network here. So yeah, I really enjoy it. I give it 3.99 of 5 stars. Enjoyable, great show. You should check it out if you haven't already. And with that, Leaving the Theater is a production of OhitsBigRon Studios. Thomas Tyra of Bias Studios mixes the show. Thank you, Tom. Show art from Heather Wilder. Theme music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. For more information about Abbott Elementary, check out our show notes. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at OhitsBigRon. That's at OhitsBigRon. You can find out more about this show and other OhitsBigRon Studio shows by following us on Instagram at OhitsBigRon Studios and on Twitter at OhitsBigRonStew. That's STEW. Leaving the Theater will be back soon, but until then, I'll be here on the couch.